Hey everybody, it's your favorite reconstructionists, Eric Brown and Phil Relly, and welcome to episode number 13 of the one and only show bringing you tips and tricks to working vehicle collision cases from the best experts in the industry every Wednesday. Today's topic is, you're the bacon to my eggs. So grab your expert angle coffee mug and settle in. 3, 2, 1, off we go. Every year, traffic crashes claim the lives of over 1 million people and account for over $500 billion of injuries around the world. A small select group of people, from police to attorneys to expert investigators, are tasked with getting justice for the victims, protecting the rights of involved parties, and ensuring the story is told accurately and honestly. Unfortunately, we believe that is an impossible task without the right team of experts. If you agree, then keep on listening for actionable tips from leading experts across various industries that you can start taking today to elevate your professional game. If you disagree, then tune in anyway and let us convince you with our ideas. We are Eric Brown and Phil Relly, and this is Crash Tech, the Expert Angle. Welcome back to the show, guys. Crash Tech, the Expert Angle podcast is brought to you by Crash Tech Reconstruction Services. If you have an accident that you need answers for, or you think the other side has it wrong, Crash Tech can help. Connect with us at www.crashtechreconstruction.com to submit your case for a free review. So guys, this is a super special show today. I am really excited to be on this one, not because Phil's back. That's actually, I think that makes the show a little sadder. But no, because we have a special guest today. We have Jessica Bacon with us, and she is a lawyer, or Jessica's been a lawyer for 14 years at Bevan & Associates.
Has that been verified?
That she's been a lawyer for 14 years, or that you make the show sadder? The polls are in. You do make the show sadder.
Daggone it.
Yeah, I remember all the how I request people to send feedback. Yeah, it's been coming in.
It's been coming.
But yeah, no. So Jessica's been a lawyer for 14 years at Bevan & Associates here in Northeast Ohio. She's also a magistrate in traffic court. And she started out doing workers' comp, has moved over to product litigation, and then she took over the personal injury department at her firm. She's been named a Super Lawyers Rising Star and has litigated hundreds of cases with millions of dollars awarded in settlements. So we want to take a second to welcome her to the show. Jessica, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe it's...
I'm excited to be here.
Is it because Phil's back?
Of course it's because Phil's back. Phil, I miss you.
Whatever.
Good morning, Jessica. It's good to see you. I'm sorry you got to put up with Eric.
I don't think we should have her on the show anymore.
Yeah, goodbye.
Click, hang up. So today's show is pretty cool. I'm actually really, really stoked about this one. So as the title alludes, you're the bacon to my eggs, right? Because they go so well together. And so I wanted to talk about, because Jessica is one of these lawyers that uses experts a lot, I feel like. Mm-hmm. I don't know, right? Would you say that you prefer to use experts?
I do. Yeah.
Hey, all right. And so I wanted to come on because there's a lot of lawyers, I think, that are either hesitant or have been burned by their experts or haven't had the best working relationships or just haven't found the right ones. And so I wanted to do a show where we could talk a little bit about your experience working with your experts, which, Jessica's obviously used Crash Tech before, which is why I asked her to come on the show. And so maybe she can tell you some of the good experiences, Jessica. Only the good.
Yeah.
None of the bad.
It's all good.
Like the time I pushed you into traffic, leave that part out.
You just want me to understand what happened. You know?
Right. Yeah. I was like, you want to know how pedestrian crashes happen? Let me show you.
There you go.
Yeah. Perfect. So so let me ask you. So have you had anything in your time now working on crashes that has stood out that you were like, okay, this is something that I really, really like to do when handling crashes?
Yeah, for sure. So I am very hands-on with my clients, with all my cases. And my clients have my cell phone number. I get to know them. I sit at their kitchen table when I sign them up. And part of that is not just knowing them, but knowing their crash, knowing what happened. And I don't mean to say anything negative about law enforcement, but sometimes the police reports just don't tell a good story. Or sometimes an accurate story as to how the crash happened.
Okay, wait. So I want to ask you real quick, because me and Phil have talked about this, and then TJ was on previously, and we talked a little bit about this with him. Do you ever feel like when you see an agency on like that, somebody's like, oh, so and so took my crash report, and you've worked enough crashes with that agency that you're like, oh man, this diagram might be completed in crayon, and it wouldn't surprise you?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. That's crazy. As law enforcement, you're like, that's kind of a shot in the gut that we're that bad at taking a report, but it's the truth. We are.
Yeah. Sometimes there's just not as much time put into them. Sometimes if one side or the other goes to the hospital from the scene, then they're just getting one side of the story. And it doesn't make sense when I talk to the clients. But because of that, I like to go to the scene. And when I was first getting started with personal injury, I would go to the scene myself, and I would try to take pictures like with my flip phone. And then I would get them, and I said, I don't know what I'm looking at. I saw something when I was there, but that doesn't come across in a photo. So one of the first time I started working with Crash Tech, Eric, I contacted you, and your first response to me was, well, can you meet me at the scene?
Yeah.
And it was close to my office, and that's what we did. And that case was an entertaining one because it was a pedestrian case.
That's to put it mildly. If you guys have a case that seems impossible, reach out to Jessica for some advice, because she takes on and wins these impossible cases.
Right. So I had someone injured, and it was pedestrian, but there was no car. There were no witnesses, but there were some toothpicks on the sidewalk that he said had been in his pocket. So that's what you saw when we met at the scene.
Yeah.
And
a little bit of blood on the curb.
A little bit of blood on the curb. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's really all it took. And to me, that looks like nothing. And then you automatically were talking about the directions the car would have come from and where he had to have been standing when he was hit in order for the blood to be where it was, for the toothpicks to be where they were, all of these things. So that's extremely helpful. And we've had cases where as soon as I get to the scene and meet you there within seconds, you're telling me, see that tire mark right there? That means that the car was hit, on the passenger side, or the car, turned this way and landed here. So they couldn't have been where they said they were when they were hit. And I'm looking at things, trying to figure out where on the road we're talking about. And you're pointing out, patterns from the tire marks instantly. And that's so helpful, because then I get all the evidence, the good and the bad.
Yeah. And actually in the criminal case we just looked at, plus two, I would say it's helpful because we went out to that scene and being able to show you where impact happened and wherever all the vehicles came to final rest, but then to also be able to see like the view obstruction because there was that hill crest.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, so like, does that stuff help then when you're talking to your clients and things like that? And they say, oh, I couldn't see the other car approaching. I mean, so does that help then being out at the scene and physically seeing it yourself? Like, oh yeah, there's a hill crest like right there. And that one hit a semi. If you remember, that semi came over the hill crest and we couldn't even see it approaching. Right.
Yeah. No, you had me stand there and say, how many seconds it's going to take. And that was a case where my client was making a left turn. And she claimed that, that there was nothing coming. She waited for all the traffic to come and made her turn. And you were able to figure out this car was coming over the hill at a high rate of speed, and that it was true. When she made her turn, there was nothing coming.
Yeah.
And the police report just said she turned in front of someone and she was cited, but being out there looking through that camera, I don't know what you call that. Super,
the total station.
The total station. Yes.
I'm revoking your expert or your reconstruction license.
Right. And people probably thought I was crazy because I'm standing there like in a dress and heels on the side of the road, looking through this camera. But but that thing is accurate, like real accurate.
And that's so important. So coming out and seeing some of the tools that we use and some of the methodologies and what we do on the scene, I mean, does that then give you more confidence if, like, when you start talking with the insurance companies or the other side, and they say, well, is it possible that gouge, was 4 inches to the left and that actually puts your client in my guy's lane? Does seeing how accurate the equipment is and how we use it and things like that, does that give you the confidence to be like, no?
Yeah, for sure it does, for sure. And because I'm at the scene and looking through that equipment, one, I'm seeing what I'm paying for in action and knowing that it's worth every penny to have that sort of clarity in the evidence. And also, I know that an insurance adjuster who's sitting behind their desk is only looking at the police report because they're not allowed the money to put out pre-suit. And that's what allows us to get, pre-suit settlements, because if we spend the money on the front end, we know it's coming back, triple.
Yeah. And so let me ask you, because you and Phil, I think with the Columbus case, have probably had the most interesting case that I've really ever seen, to put it mildly. And so, like, in that case there, and Phil, me and you have talked about this with the stay in your lane, right? And I think why it's so important to use an investigator that has on-scene experience, that has years and years and years going to crash scenes, live crash scenes, seeing what happened, talking to witnesses and everything else, not looking at photos and trying to do it later.
Right.
And so I don't know, Phil, I mean, with that Columbus case, how crucial was that, having Jessica out there and being able to put your investigator cap on and say, well, look, I've handled crashes just like this in my everyday career?
I think it's extremely beneficial, but I'd like to go back before we get into that and kind of dig into Jessica's memory bank a little bit, or thoughts. Why do you think where attorneys are reluctant to use experts, do you think it's a situation where they've been burned in the past or heard of another attorney, maybe a friend or colleague or whatnot, and because of their bad experience, they just disbelieve in the science and just say, nah, it doesn't exist? Or you think it's just they don't understand what it is? Because that kind of leads me to respond to Eric's question.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a combination of both. I think more so, though, they haven't been burned by their own expert. They've just been burned by an expert on the other side. So they just get this negative opinion that the reconstructionists are only working for the defense side or only working for the insurance company or whoever, was on the other side at that time. So they don't always understand that you guys are not biased. You're not, I know that you're not just working for who pays you, because there's been plenty of times where, you've said, Jessica, this isn't a great one. This isn't going to fly.
Right. And actually I was going to ask that. So, and this leads into the Columbus case of, is that beneficial too? So, like, me and Phil, with Crash Tech, we work every facet of reconstruction. So we do personal injury. We work for the insurance companies. We work for criminal defense. We work for prosecutors. So there's no side of this that we haven't touched.
Right.
And so when we go out to the scene, is that beneficial too? Do you think of being able to have that kind of defense mindset of, like, hey, this might not be great because this is what the defense is probably going to say.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And still going back to incorporating that with Phil's question, the fact that you guys, and I don't know if all reconstruction firms do this, I don't think so, but you guys do more than just reconstruct the scene. With that Columbus case, Phil interviewed witnesses. Phil went out and found people at their houses, and took statements from them. Tracked people down that did not want to be tracked down by phone and got them talking. And that was huge in putting this case back together and figuring out what happened. And
in that case there, I enjoyed having Jessica come out because, we have our dialogue over the phone and we get the information, or you tell me, a little bit about what the case and so on. But it's an opportunity to, when you're out there, things are going to pop up in your mind that we didn't talk about. And it's not that you didn't tell me, it's I didn't even think about telling you because at the time it didn't seem relevant. When you're 200 miles away from a scene, you don't know what you don't know until you get to the scene and actually are looking at it and going, now I remember why this, because when you first heard it, you may have thought that doesn't even make sense. But then when you see it, and then you can or state that to your expert. We shared a lot of information there when we were at the scene that we never talked about on the phone. And it's because you got to see it and it's, now it makes sense. So now it may be relevant. So let's talk about it.
Right.
I enjoy having the attorneys come to the scene because at some point you're going to be talking about that with the other side.
Sure.
Or asking questions in deposition. And when obviously the expert better have been to the scene and not just did a reconstruction from what's on paper and photos.
You mean Google Maps is not acceptable? Google Street View is not like the acceptable way to do a scene view or visit?
No. And to be out there, especially in pedestrian crashes, because, you go out, obviously everything that you see on paper in the photographs is a snapshot of a moment in time. Stand out on a 5-lane highway while cars are whizzing by you at 50 mile an hour.
Not in the lane of traffic.
It's a different perspective, or at least it's a perspective that you, as the attorney, can appreciate, because now you can kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together of, I can see how this could happen, or, it makes sense now.
Well, and not only that, but I would say, and this is a case that we didn't work with Jessica. But it kind of plays into this of Phil. And I think it was you that went out to that a Mansfield crash, straight lane of highway, car on the berm, and all these cars were passing it. Right. And so finally somebody comes along and rear ends the rear of this car. And we have fatalities and everything else.
That was
and so I think those cases there, because the attorney didn't go to the scene. And so, they're only looking at the police report. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes it rough when we submit a bill and we're like, look, you have a loser of a case. Here's the bill. Sorry. We investigated as best we could. And they didn't get it when they just kept saying, but my client's dead. And we're like, nobody else hit her. Right. And they didn't get that because that's all the defense would have had to say. It didn't matter what argument you would have brought up on the plaintiff's side. The defense literally would have just sat on the stand and said, nobody else hit her. Nobody else hit her. Nobody else hit. And the attorney didn't get that. And I think there was a little bit of
resentment.
Yeah, a little resentment that we put all the time into the recon. And at the end of the day, we're like, look, this is what the defense is going to do. And you're going to lose. It just is what it is.
And Jessica, let me ask you, but, and I think this actually goes both ways. I think it applies to the attorneys as much as it applies to the reconstructionist or the expert, whatever the situation is. But if all you do is look at the report, look at the statements, and look at the photographs without going to the scene, it can inject into your mind a bias because you can't see it, feel it, taste it, smell it, and so on. Well, you probably shouldn't taste the roadway. If you do, it's hard to tell. TJ said it tastes like chicken.
I say, well, that's the tires. Yeah, but the asphalt kind of tastes like
tires. But
yeah, asphalt tastes like Play-Doh, I think. I don't know.
But I think it creates bias in your mind because you are painting your picture in your mind as you're reading this, but you got to remember that is from the author's point of view. It's not an objective point of view.
Correct.
So if the author painted a bad picture, you're just automatically going to think,
Right. So with that Columbus case, I got the police report in that case, and it was somewhat thorough. And the last paragraph of it, that was a fatality, but the last paragraph said that if she had survived, she would have been cited for a pedestrian in the roadway. So that's what we went into this with. But after being at the scene and you showing me, exactly where she was hit, where, her purse ended up or she ended up and showing me that, we were able to to discover that she wasn't just hit and stayed there, that she had been dragged for, a few feet or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And the van that hit her had taken off. So we were able to use, video surveillance that we found at nearby business, which is another reason why people should go to the scene, because there's cameras everywhere that you wouldn't even notice. Yeah. We got that from like an auto body shop or something.
Yeah.
But knowing that, and then having you go out and interview, I think it was the employer who owned the van.
Right.
And they were not so forthcoming, with us, but that just injected so much fear that, wait, maybe he did do something wrong. Maybe there was negligence on the part of that driver. And even though the police had said if she would have lived, she would have been cited. And I had a denial of liability after your investigation and, us putting everything together. I settled that case and got $100,000 for her 3-year-old son.
Yeah.
And that was one that looked to be dead in the water, from the get-go, but it wasn't.
And I would say, like, how helpful is it too? Because you seem to get a lot of tough pedestrian cases. In fact, we just got one. But how helpful is it? Because like in the new one you just picked up, right? You actually have a lot of bad things going against your client. Like you got a crash report that has your client at fault. And you've got in the crash report, the officer's like, look, we've been out multiple times with this guy for the same thing, and everything else. And so when you initially called us about it, your thought was, you're like, man, this is really bad. Right. So is it helpful?
Negative facts.
Yeah. Negative facts. There you go. So is it helpful though to have a good relationship with a reconstruction firm that you can send stuff to? Like I said, I mean, I don't think we ever charge you for just that initial review.
No.
To look at it. And me and Phil both looked at it, and I think we kind of brought some stuff to light of like, actually, this really isn't that negative.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that one was helpful. I mean, you even went with me for one of the meetings with the client to ask him questions that I might not think to ask, because from a legal standpoint, they don't matter. But from a reconstruction standpoint, they're huge about exactly where he was, which direction he was going, things like that. So
and like
that one,
the pictures of his clothing.
Right.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that for sure. The police report says he was wearing, all black clothing. It was at night. But you were able to point out, but yes, he was also standing under a street lamp, and he's most visible in dark clothing.
Yeah.
So things like that.
And then, so I also wanted to pick your brain a little too because me and Phil on some of these previous shows have talked about setting a scope for your investigation, and it's okay to change the scope and things like that. And you even had some cases now, like our Alliance case, where you had, you called and you're like, hey, look, I've got a guy, this is what happened. You have a semi backing across the road and he collides with the trailer. And first thing I said to you in that was what? Hey, let's go out, just do the download of the truck. And let's just see, because that evidence is going to come out at some point.
Sure.
Right. So my advice to you was, let's get ahead of it and see what's in there. So we go out, and it turns out your guy's more than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Correct.
And so I think initially you were hoping that he was at the speed limit.
It's right? Nice. It's better. It's better.
So, but like in that case, I mean, was it damaging to switch the scope? Because in that one there, I was like, you know what, Jessica, you got a little bit of a speed issue. So let's just address it. Let's just get out ahead of it. Right. I mean, there's no point in shying away from it.
Right.
But let's shift the scope away from, can you guys do a speed analysis to, can you guys do like a contributing factor analysis, a time and distance, a visibility study, things like that?
Yeah. So in that one, we found out ahead, because the other side actually asked to do the download. And we just did it first. But I didn't tell them.
Right. So. Boots on the ground.
Yeah. So I knew that the speed was there. So not only did we have the speed, but that particular client at the ER said that he had dropped his phone and he was speeding and not paying attention. So now the defense has two facts that they like. But when we went out there, you showed me basically the route or the path that the semi took based on where they were going. The semi had actually passed up the street they were supposed to turn down. So they turned into a parking lot, but instead of turning around to pull out forward, they decided to back out.
Across both lanes.
Yeah, there was no way. There was trees, there was a garage, all this stuff. And you showing me everything that truck driver could have done based on what he did really negated the bad facts, that we had, because at the end of the day, the truck driver had, the last clear chance to avoid this crash. Yeah. And you were able to show that even if the client had been going the speed limit and had been paying full attention, the crash would have still happened. And that's important to an insurance company, because then they see, well, okay, even if he had been doing everything right, it's still our insured that caused this crash. If he had been doing anything right, this doesn't happen.
Right.
And if our guy had been doing everything right, it still happens. You know? So that was huge. That was a 0 to 56,000. And that was pre-suit. I mean, that was a settlement. We didn't have to file on that. I gave them your report and worked those arguments in, and they came around.
And in that one there too, there was the tire marks for where the trailer were under question. So that was another thing too of being able to go out to the scene and say, no, look, this is the tire marks. I don't know what their adjuster's looking at.
Right. So they just had a photo of tire tracks, like my old school flip phone photo, it looked like.
Yeah.
And they were saying that that's my guy's truck's tire marks, showing that he had gone left of center. And you went out there and actually looked at the tire marks and took way better quality photos. And
measurements.
And measurements. And we were able to show them, no, it's not my guy's tires left of center. It's your guy's trailer, in that lane that was crossing over the line, because the tracks weren't even coming, from the direction that the insurance company thought they were. Yeah.
So I got to ask then, I mean, because I feel like there are a lot of attorneys that as soon as they get that the negative facts, as you like to call them, at that point, they either start to kind of panic, or they don't want to call an expert because, they're like, well, I already have negative facts in this case. So, you know what I mean? I'm just going to litigate the best offer I can and go. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, is it beneficial then to kind of get, and again, it plays into it, not just investigators that have a degree and sat in a classroom and saw some staged crashes, but call investigators that go to thousands of these scenes a year live while the cars are still there, smoke's coming off the airbags, bodies are being treated in the roadway by medics. Is it beneficial to call those kind of investigators and be like, hey, go out and take a look at this? And I mean, what do you think? Is it worth the money?
If all the facts were in our favor, then we wouldn't have jobs, because the insurance companies would just make settlement offers to the clients before they have a chance to get an attorney. So if they're coming to us, it's because there's some facts not, in our favor. And it doesn't make any sense to just try to spin those facts, because the insurance company knows it. And the insurance company is either going to lowball you so that you go away. And if you just tell your client, look, this is the best we're going to get with these facts, then you're not a very good personal injury attorney, because you're not doing the best for them.
Yeah.
But if you can take those negative facts and speak with, you or Phil about it. And I mean, there's going to be times where you're going to say, yeah, I mean, that's a negative fact, but, here's some negative facts on the defense side, and you help us create these arguments, and, you don't charge me to help me out and point things out to me. at a scene. There's not an extra charge for that.
Yeah. Now be careful, because I think there are some expert firms that may charge extra for that. So make sure you're asking prior to,
Right. Well, I mean, before you guys, the other firms that I worked with have never offered to have me come to the reconstruction or come to the scene. So, so I don't know how those firms charge, but even if I did get pay for a full reconstruction at the beginning, you guys are very cost effective with reconstructions. And if it's going to aid in a settlement without having the client have to go through a trial, then it's absolutely worth it, because the insurance companies are doing nothing. They're putting no costs forward. They're doing no investigations until it's 100% certain that the case is going to trial, and usually that's not until a month before trial. And by that time, there's nothing for those experts to look at. I mean, you're so far removed from the situation.
At that point, they're almost just relying on our evidence.
Right.
So, yeah. So I would say, I mean, because you've had some cases where, think about negative facts here. You have a pedestrian, again, in all dark clothing, standing in the travel lane of a roadway on the wrong side of the road where she's not supposed to be, and gets struck by a vehicle coming down the road that is going the speed limit, maintaining their lane. And as soon as they saw the pedestrian, they got on their brakes. I would say, like, that case there that we had.
Yeah.
That one, I would say almost every attorney out there would be like, you know what, I'm just going to put an offer in to the insurance company, and just whatever they give us, if they give me $20, sweet. So I think in that case, there would be no advantage to hiring an expert, but we actually gave you some comparative good arguments, I think.
Yeah. So that was Stark County case recently. And everything you said, this young mother, standing in the road, having a debate with her significant other. Car comes across the other way and hits and kills her. And a lot of negative facts. But, you were able to explain to me that the vehicle that her significant other was driving was parked, stopped in the roadway, had a lift kit, so the truck was higher. So his lights were actually blinding oncoming traffic. So in a roundabout way, it was his fault that the person driving the other car that ultimately struck her couldn't see her. And I think there were some other facts with that you had pointed out about, I don't know if it was about speed. There was something else with that one on the other car. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I mean, we ended up getting $75,000 pre-suit. Yeah. Didn't have to file, just, gave all my arguments to the insurance company. And, obviously we went back and forth on some things, but, at the end of the day, the actual cause of the crash, I was able to argue, was they're insured having brights on and being stopped, in the roadway.
Yeah. With non-factory modifications to the truck and everything else and actually in that one there, the other argument you were talking about was speed. I think this is where it comes down to, Phil, thoughts on this, of having an expert that does prosecution work. I think this is one of the benefits of me and Phil prosecuting criminal cases, is our understanding of the law and the ORC. Now, on no level am I even claiming that we interpret law or know anything near what the attorneys know. That's not my claim. But at least having an understanding of it, because in that case, you're right. You had the oncoming vehicle that is being blinded and she's at the speed limit. But my argument was that, if you can't see, if you're driving down the road and you're being blinded by oncoming headlights, is it reasonable and prudent to just barrel through there and not reduce your speed?
Right. That's what it was. Exactly. Because the settlement was a combination of two insurance policies. So both paid on that.
Phil, what are your thoughts here, man? I mean, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few, and I think the listeners ought to be proud. I've sat back quietly today.
That's because we hurt your feelings right off the rip. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
If I hurt Phil's feelings right from the word go, he'll be quiet.
So I've been sitting back listening to you two yammer on, and no, and actually listening to you guys talking, it goes back to conversations you and I've had numerous times, that the facts of the case are what they are, but when you have bad facts or damaging facts or whatever you want to label them as,
negative facts,
whatever. It opens up different doors, and it's you take this fact, your thought process may have been, the case, I believe, is headed this direction. These are, the circumstances. So we need to address the elephant in the room in this situation. But what door does it open up for other circumstances? So if this negative fact, and let's say it's speed, is a hurdle we're going to have to jump over, what other circumstance did speed create, or what other circumstance played into that? So you can look at a plethora of contributing circumstances that played into this, and as a result of this, it created this, and and you just keep adding links to the chain. Just because you have a weak link in a chain doesn't mean the chain still won't function. It's just you got to keep going back on the links, and then at the end, how do all of those links play together and create the situation that erupted? But oftentimes I think a lot of experts will pigeonhole themselves with, this and this happened, this was the cause. So, yep, you share the lion's portion of the negligence, and that may not be the case. So sometimes I think it's just, if you've got a lazy expert, if you're fine with that, then that is what it is. But I think that goes back to coming out to the scene.
Yeah.
When you come out to the scene and you start thinking about all the links in the chain that you know about so far, and start looking at those links at the scene and moving your eyes around.
Yep.
What other links are you discovering? How long is your chain getting at that point? Because it's important, but you just can't, I don't know. Eventually you do have to stop and say, okay, this is what we've got. You can't go all the way back to, okay, well, if you would have got out of bed and put both feet on the floor, then this crash would have never happened 7 hours later.
So you mean if a vehicle didn't come off the assembly line going 10,000 miles an hour 5 years earlier? Yeah. So Jessica, I do want to ask you, and we're actually up against our time limit here for the day. So I want to ask, though, my kind of final question to wrap everything up. And guys, don't worry if you've enjoyed this show with Jessica. She's going to be back in a couple episodes. If you didn't enjoy it, then just pretend I didn't say that and tune in. Maybe she'll be better next time. No, I'm just kidding. But so what do you thoughts, right? Because I think in a lot of cases where attorneys get presented these negative facts, that they are tempted to just hire the liar for hire firm. Is it better to just say, you know what, man, this just doesn't look like a good case. I'm just going to hire this expert firm and pay them to say this. I'm going to literally type their report for them, send it to them, and I want them to type it on their letterhead. Is it better to go that route? Or do you think it's better to say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to hire a firm that has a lot of experience of doing all the different sides of work, and looking at things differently, that are going to tell me the truth, so I can get out in front of it, but then shift focus to another area of the crash?
Yeah, that's super important to do that, because the defense or the insurance companies, they take their 2 or 3 facts and they run with them the entire time, from their first conversation with you until the jury is going back to deliberate. They don't move outside the box. They don't do anything. They take these facts. So when you guys come in, you can't come in and make my client, not speeding or
I don't know. There are some reconstruction firms that we've seen do that.
Well, you shouldn't. I mean, the facts are the facts, and that's why they're called facts. But, at the end of the day, you guys coming in, my client's still speeding, or my client was still drunk, or whatever. But that doesn't mean that they were at fault. Just because there's negative facts, just because they were intoxicated, just because they were walking in the middle of the road, just because they were speeding, it's still, from a legal perspective, does not mean that they were at fault, does not mean that they asked to be hit and killed in the middle of the road, So, and even we've had plenty where my clients were cited. I mean, everybody says they were at fault, but, we've gotten around that, because at the end of the day, those negative facts are going to come out to a jury. But if I can, and I think we'll talk about the litigation aspect in a later episode, but if I can have you guys, in deposition or on the stand explaining to the jury, well, those facts that have been put up on PowerPoints by the defense, they don't matter. They don't ultimately become the facts that caused the crash, and they don't equal, fault, all the time.
Yeah, the difference.
You say that, because that's exactly what Eric and I have been saying for a number of years now. Fault doesn't always equal cause.
Right.
I mean, you have the cause of the crash is one thing, the fault of the crash is another. Those are two entirely different arguments and different pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I've got to ask then, so we can get everybody into work, because again, I think we've hit another episode now where everybody's sitting in the parking lot in front of their law firms, and their bosses are looking out the windows like, why is he sitting in his car still? It's because they're listening to this show. So final thoughts, Phil, anything, or was that your final thought of cause and fault?
I've got a lot of thoughts, but then their boss is going to be mad because they're going to be later.
Keep it clean.
We'll just let them go to work today.
Jessica, any final words of wisdom that you want to impart upon some of the attorneys that are listening to this to help get them off on the right foot?
Yeah, I would just say work with experts that make you part of the process, because the best way that you can explain your case to a jury or explain the crash and the positives and negatives to the client is by knowing and understanding it yourself. So work with a firm that invites you, not just allows you, but invites you to come to the scene and walk through it, with you, and really understand your arguments. And don't assume just because you have some negative facts that there's nothing you can do. Work with experts that are knowledgeable about the scene and the crashes, and that have been there, and that aren't willing to just be, the liars for hire. Yeah.
Right. I mean, because I would hope that you appreciate that when we just are honest with you and like, look, Jessica, this is going to be a tough case. This is going to be a fight. Like, we're not going to bend the truth for you. We're not going to lie. We're not going to be immoral. But
nor have I ever asked you to.
Never. You've never. I mean, you ask us, hey, look, go out, be honest, be truthful, and let me know, is this a rough case or is this a good case? Yeah. And there's been times that we've come back and we're like, this is a doozy.
Right. But we've been successful on those too. We've got a winning record.
It's right. I think so. I think we've won I think we have won every case that we've gone up against. So you said you thought up some final thoughts. We don't care. You lost your chance.
Shut up. I think it's, and this is my final thought, obviously, if you do have that challenging case, make sure you're working with an expert and ask your expert, do they have a lot of experience working that type of a case? You know, if you have a pedestrian case, because reconstructionists all have had training in working, just a plethora of different type of cases. But how much experience does your expert you're consulting with have working pedestrian cases? Because that's going to become a very, very, very pivotal conversation at some point down the road. So if they've primarily always worked commercial motor vehicle crashes and they've worked 2 pedestrian cases, when you're looking at adding up a lot of other contributing circumstances, that's really going to become pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Argument.
Yeah. Well, everyone, that's going to wrap it up for the day. As always, jump over to Facebook and make sure you follow and join Crash Tech, the Expert Angle group. Also, if you want to leave us feedback, have an idea for a show, or would like to be on a future show, head over to crashtechexpertangle.podbean.com and click the link on the right that says contact the show. The form will come up. Put anything that you want right in there. If you want more information on expert consulting services or training, visit us online at www.crashtechreconstruction.com. And finally, if you're a PI attorney, make sure you request to join the Crash Site Facebook group. Or if you're a defense attorney, make sure you request to join the Crash Site Defense Facebook group. Neither site contains any ads or spam. It's just a private community that brings experts from all different areas together with attorneys to collaborate or ask questions. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in. And remember, always leave your accident victims better off than you found them, because at the end of the day, everything we're doing is for them.